I've had people that it's literally taken them years to figure it out. They started off with family members. They had to go through so many staff members and it all just went to hell for years, but they kept going. He's up like 400,000 this year. He was able to quit his previous job and now he's crushing it just doing this wholesaling stuff.
Ed, thank you for joining me for our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm over here, Matt Camp, head of partnerships at DealMachine. And on these, we like to shine an industry spotlight on experts like yourself, hear your inspiring stories, and see how you see the real estate world evolving. So today, really excited to welcome on our friend Ed Hayes. You might know him from his great YouTube content. He does great stuff on social media. I know you're a real estate investor, you're a wholesaler, a podcaster, author, coach. You put out a lot of great stuff and help people in that way. And then you really help students just around the world earn millions of dollars in real estate since 2017. So Ed, really appreciate you coming on and, helping educate our audience too, man.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, man. I really do, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit about your journey there, but could you talk a little bit more around how you got into real estate and what that looked like to even get to your first deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So like it was a while back, man. I started off in like 2016-ish is when I actually started wholesaling. I was literally just at home like YouTubing like how to make $5,000 fast, how to make $10,000 fast. And it didn't come across right away, but like a couple days later I ended up getting fed this video that was talking about wholesaling. And I ended up watching the video. I started watching more. I started just really kind of diving into it a lot, like right off the bat. But I was still working. I was working as a CNA. So I was literally going to work to go wipe butts for a living. It's kind of crazy, So I would be like crying going to work in the morning, like, oh my God, like this is terrible. But long story short, I ended up basically ended up quitting the first job that I was working at when I first started wholesaling. I quit that job and started working for a lady privately, and she ended up passing away as well. And so it was like a few weeks into me working for her, maybe a month or so. And so it was basically like, okay, now I quit my job and this lady has passed away. Now I basically got to figure it out, or I'm about to be homeless, essentially. So it took me like a couple months. It took about 8 weeks for me to get my very first deal. I got it through a Google ad, actually. Like I had some previous experience doing Google ads in the past with like a social media company. So I was like, all right, let's try this. It just so happened to get somebody, some guy that had just got out of jail that wanted to sell his property or whatever. And so I ended up making $8,000 on that deal. And I basically never looked back, man. I was like, hey, this is for me, man. I'm never going back to a job.
That's crazy, man. So once you did that deal, how did you start getting to that consistency level? Like what were the kind of the marketing strategies you were using, and like how were you going out and finding the leads? Like I'd love to know how you went from that, because that first one I know really changes people's mindset typically of like, man, what's possible even. But how did you kind of continue to take that to the next level?
Yeah, that's real interesting. That getting that proof of concept made a huge difference. But to be honest, I wasn't like very consistent right at the beginning. Like for me personally, it wasn't until I got my second mentor. Like my first mentor kind of burned me, but when I got my second mentor, that was the person that showed me how to start doing virtual deals. As well as like really kind of building this thing out like a business and not just kind of doing it like a one-off and stuff like that. So, he kind of took me under his wing, actually showed me the ropes of not just doing Chicago, which I was living in, but all across the nation, and be able to start doing a lot more deals. So that was kind of like that thing that kind of changed it in my brain or whatever. Like, oh, it doesn't just have to be local. And what I can see, I can actually go out here and start getting a lot more deals if I can kind of branch off to the entire United States. And I still do that to this day.
And what do you think? I mean, the virtual side, I know we hear a lot of questions around that of like how to be successful doing that. Like, what do you think separates the people who are kind of dabbling in doing virtual from the ones who actually are like successful in virtual investing like that?
That's a great question. I would say like some of the probably like the biggest things is being able to really analyze a deal and underwrite, and also kind of like establishing a team in those markets, right? Like you got to know that this actually makes sense. So you got to do some really good due diligence if you're not actually physically going to be at that property. So I think like a lot of people just think that, hey, look, there are some properties on Zillow or whatever, let me just get it out there or whatever. But I think you need to be really like market specific. So don't kind of be all over the United States maybe at the beginning. Maybe
Mhm.
just choose like a few different markets that you really start to focus on. Build a team of maybe agents that you work with in that area. Talk to other wholesalers in the area. Establish a list of buyers and find out what they're looking for in those areas. And then that'll give you a lot of insight into how to approach these markets, because there's a big difference between trying to do a deal in, let's say, Chicago versus like California in terms
Mhm.
of like the legalities, and it's a lot to take in. So if every deal you're doing is in a different state, it may be quite difficult to be able to pull it off initially.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's something too. I love seeing your process. You've talked about like, hey, you've established yourself as wholesaling. You've done a great job at that. Over time, you're looking at kind of that more, buy and hold, kind of build a portfolio, generational wealth type stuff. Can you tell us more about that journey, how that's going, like why you made that decision? That'd be great to hear.
Yeah, man. So basically, like earlier this year, I basically came to a conclusion in my life. Is like, okay, well, I've been doing wholesaling for quite some time, since 2016, right? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I really want to just kind of level this thing up, right? And I kind of thought about it like, okay, well, I can either sell more deals, like do more volume, or I can earn more money per deal. And so I started thinking, and I've thought about actually trying to buy my own deals and stuff like that in the past, but I've made so many excuses for myself in the past. I would say, oh, I'm not ready yet, or maybe I should just buy something to live in, or maybe this, or maybe that, or the market's up, the market's down, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. I feel like I gave myself a lot of cop outs in the past or whatever, but now kind of like that transition process happened, because I was like, well, if I want to earn more money, then what are the biggest earners in real estate doing? They're typically actually doing projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the wholesaler typically isn't getting the lion's share of the deal. They're selling it off to somebody else that's going to make significantly more. And like the lion's share typically isn't going to be going to the wholesaler. The lion's share is usually going to that guy that's actually doing the project. So it's like, why not actually be the guy that does the project? And kind of getting into that process has been very eye opening and very enlightening. Let's put it like that. For real.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would say, what are some of the top lessons you've learned so far? Like, I know you're just getting into that, and we've got a ton of people who are watching this that probably long term have those aspirations of leveling up and getting into the even the more serious flips or the buy and holds. Like, I'd love to hear kind of your main lessons learned thus far in that journey, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Actually, it's been a ton, to be honest with you. Like, it was, it always kind of looks so simple on the outset, but when you actually start to get into it, you realize like, oh, this is like a whole creature in itself. This is not just wholesaling a property off. Like, you need certain players in place. So I would say like some of the things that I realized that you kind of need in place, or some of the things that lenders or just in general, like the process will require. Let's put it like that. You're
Mm-hmm.
typically going to need liquidity, experience, and credit.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously, like you're typically going to usually want to have like hard money lenders that you have relationships with, as well as private money lenders that you're going to want to have relationships with, and you're
Mm-hmm.
basically going to be piecing that money together. And so there's a lot of variability, but in general, like you kind of want to establish that team and understand what the process is going to look like in advance of like actually just diving into something. Let's put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like once you really start to get into it, you may see like, oh, these requirements are this, or those requirements are that, or maybe everybody that you're trying to lend money from is like, no, this is a trash deal, or it could be a lot of different things that you'll end up learning along that way. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess like one of the biggest takeaways that I would say though is that if you can do yourself a favor, definitely get yourself a mentor. Find somebody that you either know or that you can pay, maybe even to, advise you along that path of actually purchasing your first property, or, actually transitioning from wholesaler. Maybe you're not even in wholesaling at all. Maybe you just buy properties right now, but maybe you want to buy more. Hire somebody or work with somebody that can actually just expedite that process for you, so you're not kind of figuring it out along the way.
For
That's what
sure.
I would say.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, I'm in the St. Louis market, and I'm using. I mean, we're practicing what we preach, using DealMachine here locally, really actively doing deals locally myself, and that's
Right.
been my number one lesson I've learned and thing that I could point to for any success we've had is like, hey, it's the network and teaming up with people, having
Mm-hmm.
accountability partners, having people who are kind of coaching you through that have been there before and can kind of show you the way. Like all
Yeah.
of that matters a ton. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's been super helpful for me locally. But
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Highly
nice.
recommended.
What
For
I'm curious. You talk about like the underwriting piece being so important. Can you? Is there anything you can break down in terms of like deal evaluation differences between how you think about a wholesale deal versus what you're doing now?
oh yeah, yeah, for sure. So like as a wholesaler, very often, you may not think so hard or deeply about um what you're actually going to be selling to the buyer.
Mhm.
Right, so like let's say like if you're going to buy something yourself, you're going to be doing some good due diligence. You're probably going to be checking the property tax records. You're going to be seeing if it's on the demolition list, so you're not buying a lemon. You're going to be checking stuff and doing even like soft title checks. Let's kind of consider like a soft title check, like kind of seeing everything that's going on with the property if you're
Mhm.
actually going to purchase it. Another thing is that like you're going to be accounting for a little bit of everything, and you also want to get some good profit. Like I think wholesalers don't even kind of consider some of the costs that go into actually purchasing the properties, which include closing costs, hard money points,
Mhm.
reserves that you need to have in your account. Like there's a lot of things that you need to account for: hard money payments, private money, like the kickback for them at the end of the deal, and kind of piecing that together and negotiating that. It's a lot of factors that you may not consider on the
Mhm.
outset, but like you have to be kind of knowledgeable about this stuff to actually get the best results. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, yeah. I do think you do a great job on the you're kind of doing it right now, obviously, but kind of sharing those lessons you've learned and kind of sharing your knowledge over time over social media. Like you've got a variety of spots you do that in. Has social media helped you on the real estate front? In addition to that, like if you're somebody who's especially newer to this, because there's a fair number of people listening to this that are probably newer, doing their
Hmm.
first deal or first 10 deals, I'd say. Would you recommend they spend time on their social media and building that, or do you think that's a future thing? Like, how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I would say that in 2024 and going into 2025, like we're kind of living in this digital world now
Mhm.
where, like, to be honest, like when I see people that don't have like any type of social media, it almost seems like they're a bot, or like they're not even like a real person or something. They may be a scammer or something. Like,
Credibility
I
for
don't
sure.
know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of weird now or whatever. So I would typically recommend that people have some type of social blueprint, if you will, or
Mhm.
not blueprint, I should say footprint, like some type of social media footprint. So like I would say between like a Facebook and a LinkedIn, probably at least. Facebook is kind of like a backyard barbecue. LinkedIn is like being at the office. Instagram is like the club almost, but it's like important to have some of these profiles, I would say, just so when people go look you up, they can actually see that you are who you say you are. And if you do have those profiles, then definitely put something at least around the lines of real estate investor in your bio or something. It
Mhm.
shouldn't just be like, oh, I'm playing 2K or COD or something like that or whatever. Like it should all kind of match if you are going to do the social media game.
Yeah,
I personally don't think that it's like the end all be all, but I do think that it's a good addition to anybody that's going to be taking this seriously and doing it for a long term.
that's great, man. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a good way to think about it as well. I know. I mean, I again, like see the stuff you put out on social media, and I know you get a ton of people, whether you're coaching these newbies or you're getting questions on social media about certain things. Like from
Mhm.
the newbies that are successful and stick with it and go out there and really get traction versus the ones that are kind of kicking the tires but never really commit. Like what do you think are those differences? Like what are the things that you really recommend? Like, hey, here, if you want to go into this and be serious about it and really succeed long term, like what are the couple of the main things that are those factors that you think lead to that success?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. It should be very helpful for those who are listening. I've coached hundreds of
Put me on the
people
spot.
from literally all across the world.
Mhm.
So like I think that some of the most important things that I've noticed is that the people that ask the best questions are usually some of the biggest winners, as well as the people that are the most consistent and diligent. and that actually do what they say that they're going to do. Essentially, a lot of times it just boils down to that. If you're actively doing the job, like we have to be shooting shots, meaning making offers, in my opinion. If you're making offers consistently and you're doing it every day, and you're actually, obviously working to seal the deal on the back end or whatever, but you have to be making offers. Otherwise, there's not going to be any money in the pipelines. So the people who make the most offers, and then the people that just don't make excuses and they just keep going no matter what it takes. I've had people that it's literally taken them years to figure it out, like perfectly, let's put it like that. Like they started off with family members, or like they had to go through so many staff members, and it all just went to hell for years, but they kept going. And now, like, I'm thinking of someone in particular or whatever. Shout out to my guy Eddie or whatever. Like, he's up like 400,000 this year because it
Wow.
clicked for him. Though it ended up working. He was able to quit his previous job, and now he's crushing it, just doing this wholesaling stuff, right? So it's like the people that just don't take no for an answer. The people that just keep going no matter what the failures are. Don't get me wrong. Not everything is for everyone, right? But Eddie knew that this was for him, and so he kept going.
Yep.
He didn't stop. He didn't just make excuses for himself. He said,
Yep.
all right, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna get rid of those people. I'm gonna hire new people. I'll do it this way. I'll figure it out. And he just figured it out ultimately. And then he made it happen. But that's hard. It's way easier said than done. Don't get me wrong or whatever, but I think that that's the most beneficial thing that you can do, is just be diligent and just don't give up. And yeah, take this stuff seriously, man. It's a job. It's not a hobby. It's not just something that you do partially. Like, put in as much effort as possible.
That's awesome to hear. Like you said, people, removing every barrier in front of them. Even like you said, there's a lot of excuses you can make, a lot of things you can put in front of yourself, saying, "Oh, I'll do it someday," or "I'll do it when this is perfect," or that. Like, there's never a convenient time to just jump in and go for it. And to see people succeeding because they're persistent, sticking with it, no matter what the market's doing, no matter what the conditions are. Like, you're, regardless of external factors, you controlling what you can do and putting in the work time and time again, like that is a recipe for long-term success. So
100%.
appreciate you coming on, man, and really like inspiring people that way. And I know that's something we're always trying to reinforce that message of like, hey, it's not a matter of if you'll go do that deal, it's when you do. If you continuously do these things we're talking about, follow up with what you say you're going to do, even just as simple as that, of like making a promise and following through on it, doing that consistently is going to put you above the vast majority of people. So, yeah, and I really appreciate your time, man. I know you mentioned, you've got the coaching. Is there like a one-off call that you mentioned you could help our people with? I thought,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. So if you guys are looking for one-on-one coaching, or maybe you just want to do like a one-off, I do 90-minute phone calls. Everything I charge is very reasonable and affordable. I'm trying to get rich off of real estate, not necessarily off of coaching or whatever. I've been coaching for years or whatever, so I love it. So I do it because I do enjoy helping people like really get out here and change their lives, because I know that that's what wholesaling can do. Like I said, it's not for everybody or whatever, but if you guys want to hop on a call, definitely, I can shoot you some links, man, if you want to have it below the video or something like that or whatever. I can't remember what the links are off the top of my head, but I'll be more than glad to hop on a one-on-one. If you guys want that hands-on support, we just do a one-off phone call. It's Zoom recorded, and yeah, let's make it happen, guys.
Awesome, Ed. Well, I again appreciate you being such a great just resource for the community, sharing your your journey here, being so transparent about that, and again, really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me come on, man.
Absolutely. And to everyone watching, is Matt Camp with DealMachine, and happy deal finding.